I'm really excited about today's discussion uh, with Laura Way Laura Wayman. Sorry, I'm a little bit flustered there, folks. Who is known to many as the Dementia Whisperer, and uh, how we came about this discussion today with Laura is I had her on a few months ago talking about her brand new book. And somebody in the audience said, well, Laura, I'm a caregiver for somebody with dementia. What's the first thing I should start doing? And Laura, you said, well, the first thing that I tell folks to do is start journaling some of the symptoms and the things that you're seeing. And I almost fell out of my chair when I heard that, Laura, because I've had so many thought leaders and experts on in caregiving, dementia care, what have you. And that's the first time somebody brought up keep a journal of what's going on in your life. And I just I immediately said, okay, I got to have you back on. We got to explore this topic in greater detail because I see the value to healthcare practitioners, to family members, to just, if I'm experiencing what I might think are memory impairment issues, I can look back through a notebook or a spreadsheet and kind of reflect on a few months of my behavior. So I'm delighted that you came back on, and
For
and
having.
but I know there's probably some folks in the audience that weren't on that first discussion. So for those folks, let's get to know you a little bit better. If you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about your background and what led to you being becoming the dementia whisperer.
Well, of course, history is important. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So, really, it's an interesting way that I became the dementia whisperer because my mom and dad had a wonderful marriage, a wonderful life, and they set out to live their retirement dream. They bought an RV, began to travel all over, and my dad began to show dementia symptoms. Now, I have a degree in gerontology, but I didn't learn about dementia. I'm going to tell you, I learned about it firsthand, kind of going through this journey with my mom and dad. But my mom didn't really share how hard this journey was. They were on the road. They were living their retirement dream. And so I didn't realize how impactful this dementia care journey can be on that caregiver and the ultimate toll that she paid for self-sacrificing, trying to care for him as his symptoms progressed. And basically what happened, Steve, is that she was caring for him on her own, and none of the family realized how difficult it was, and she had a sudden heart attack. Now, and took her away from us. Now, 68% of the time, if that caregiver doesn't ask for help, now I know this, they get sick and go first because of this long journey. So it was
Hmm.
kind of trial by fire. What is dementia? Why didn't I know to help her sooner? And with my background in gerontology, I was frustrated with that. Then, throughout my career, I've been an executive director, I've owned an in home care company, and still I was frustrated that we didn't really understand dementia symptoms and how to better connect and engage. So that's how a loving approach to dementia care was born. I began to really journal and study these different case studies. How can I help? What works with this family? What works with this professional? What works? And so began to write about that to understand it. So in my own way, I kind of journaled my journey. But as I'm working with families, what I found, Steve, is I need history. I need to know how this is progressing because dementia symptoms progress slowly over time, most of the time. Now, there can be a traumatic brain injury and there's dementia symptoms in the blink of an eye, but the majority of these illnesses, diseases that cause dementia symptoms, these symptoms progress over time. And so me as a emotional support professional, medical professionals, other family caregivers, we're going to learn the most from looking at the baseline. Where does this individual start with these no dementia symptoms and this brain function that's working, and how it proceeds down the line? So like you and I were talking about earlier, when I have a family that comes to me and says, well, here we are, we're here, we have these behaviors that, or symptoms and behaviors and challenges that we're dealing with, they're already down the road so far. So it helps me to understand, when did you first see this? And those families that really pay attention early are, I can help them in a deeper way earlier. So that's why I always tell the families, I want you to start, when you start seeing those changes, really let's track those over time, because that's how we recognize dementia symptoms, right?
I mean, this makes such great sense, and that's why I was shocked to have never heard it in all of our discussions. So let's and maybe you've got some real life examples that you could share, but let's just let's just sort of start where we were had our conversation on the last time, where the person is sort of like, what should I do first? And your response was, hey, start journaling. So um, maybe kind of walk us through what that might look like. And then folks, just as a reminder, feel free to jump in with questions, comments. If you've journaled something, if you've had a current challenge, if you're currently challenged with something and you want to noodle it through on how you might document this, or any approach to your care.
Absolutely. So let's take a good example might be that you might notice that your loved one, if you're a family caregiver, maybe they're getting more confused in the afternoon. And so what we want to know is what perhaps is triggering that. Often when I hear that, it's called sundowning.
Okay.
Sundowning is when there's more behaviors in the afternoon. So we want to start tracking changes. Perhaps there's more sundowning when your loved one has had to have, or has had more stimulation outside of their routine, because they're less likely to have any kinds of that brain lockdown, that sundowning, when they're trying to think more often and we're not stepping in and thinking for them because they have a broken thinker. That's what's happening. So they're having to use this broken thinker more often. Maybe they had to go out for a doctor's appointment, which was very stimulating in a negative way for them. But maybe they have less sundowning because it was more of a quiet, more routine sundowning, or routine day, so there's less sundowning. So when we start to track that, we can see those changes over time.
I love it. And now just because we're carrying over from the last discussion, I have a question. I want to jump back on that, but before we do, I want to just let you kind of clarify the broken thinker, because somebody who didn't attend our first discussion, give us your little soapbox speech on the broken thinker, because somebody might be tuning in and it's like, oh, that's not a very pleasant way to refer to dementia,
Right.
but explain that.
Okay, so my 30-second elevator speech is: dementia is not an illness, dementia is not a disease, dementia is not a brain injury, dementia is a list of symptoms. Now, what does symptoms tell us? It tells us that there is, if you are experiencing dementia symptoms, there is some cause that's happening in your brain, which could be an illness, could be a disease, could be maybe a brain trauma of some kind. You're losing normal brain function, your ability to process, to understand the world around you. And it can be little pieces at a time. That's why I call it a broken thinker. You're having more and more difficulty processing and thinking and understanding what you see, what you hear, how to move safely, how to problem solve. So it's not also about memory loss, it's about the inability to process the information that memories bring us.
I love it. And I love the analogy and because we all know, like, let's use our bones for example, is that we can have a broken bone, okay, and there's nothing the matter with saying we got a broken bone. We know what that means, and but there's all different levels. It's a hairline fracture. It's osteoporosis where it could be sort of a progressive thing that you have to watch. It could be a sprain that's you know. So I like how you frame that. So
Yeah.
that's really good. What I also like, I mean, again, I'm so excited about this concept of journaling is the the idea that, let's say that you or your loved one is showing aggressive behavior in the evening or something like that. It's so easy to just isolate one or two bad incidents, maybe over a month, and
Yes.
feel like this is my dad's behavior. But when you really get down and you document it and you oh wow, those were the 2 days that I took him to a doctor's appointment. But you're never going to put two and two together if you don't either put pen to paper or document this. Um, James has a question. Let's make sure that we address that. James says, is there a concern that a third party family member may consider that a caregiver doing a journal has been gaslighting the patient? James, well, Laura, uh, let me if you understand the context of that question, definitely answer it. James, I might invite you to elaborate a little bit more on that as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe he is talking about, and let's see if I can clarify this a little bit. Gaslighting might be the intention of the caregiver. So if the intention of the caregiver is to say, I see these changes, and I think this happened right before, that would be the intention of using journaling in a positive way. If I see, I'm really tired of dad being angry in the afternoon and I think he's just being mean, that's gaslighting. That's
Okay.
not, let's figure out what is happening instead of the situation and trying to stop it, fix it, or change it because we can't. But what we can do is better manage it if we're coming from a place where we want to maybe change our care approach or change the routine or do something that's going to help that person, not necessarily complain or have negative thoughts about what's happening. Is that?
Well, I think that was a really great response, and I think that's great. But feel free to jump in and if you want more elaboration on that. But I thought that was great. Okay, I love it. We got questions coming in fast and furious. This is going to be a
Good,
great discussion. Thank you,
good, good.
everybody. Keep it coming. Okay, so we got somebody that says, would you say that sundowning is a type of reaction to stress? Maybe just elaborate a little bit about sundowning and
Yes.
what that is.
Absolutely, because I was an executive director. I saw sundowning on my dementia care floor and I watched it. Now, the way that I was training my staff before I started to notice this is I was training them to ask questions. So this is what I saw. Good morning. My staff would say to my residents, good morning. Would you like to get up? What would you like to wear? Are you hungry? Would you like cream in your coffee? They were constantly making that person think of a response by asking questions, which works for a healthy brain. But I saw my residents get more and more stressed by having to think of an answer. So, yes, I would see in the afternoon sundowning. So I said to the staff, let's do a little trial period. 48 hours, no questions, only positive action statements. So this is what they did. Good morning. It's so good to see you. I made your favorite for breakfast. Come with me. No questions. All day, 48 hours. We had no sundowning. None.
Wow. I remember this from our first discussion is that folks, if your loved ones have dementia, try to minimize the amount of questions and oftentimes this creates more conversation anyways
It
and
does.
it's contrary to what we
Relaxes their
think.
brain. Yes, it relaxes their brain. They stop resisting because you're thinking for them. You're giving them the answer that makes them feel good rather than asking them to come up with that themselves, which stresses their brain, which exactly what this question was. I'm going to answer it completely. Yes, sundowning is really a result of stressing that person's brain with
Hmm.
questions, not thinking for them. Absolutely.
And the person that asked the question said it sounds like sundowning is a reactive defense too.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's one of the common themes that we've heard on a lot of these discussions is you can't have an argument with somebody with dementia. There's just no and asking a question could potentially trigger an argument.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I love this question here from Jonathan. He says, I'm a 78-year-old solo ager. My memory is not what it used to be, but otherwise, I haven't noticed any other dementia symptoms. Would it be helpful or useful for me to start a journaling process on my own? And I'm sure you agree, Laura. I think it would be a wonderful idea, Jonathan, for you and all of us to do some form of personal journaling that could potential in the future enable us to self-evaluate ourselves. But more importantly, just imagine if Laura, if Jonathan had some changes and he brought this into his healthcare professional.
Exactly. And for himself to really be able to see clearly and have more clarity about what changes he and how that's making him feel. So there's two reasons to journal: to improve communication with healthcare providers and to relieve caregiver stress. So you're caring for yourself, basically, Jonathan. And so what a good question. And one of my favorite presentations is, if I get dementia symptoms, what would I want the world to know? And I have heard so many times from people in the audience, I would want my family to know how this all feels. And so I want to write in my journal, for my family, if I get dementia symptoms, I want to write to them that I like to wear socks to bed because it makes me comfortable. Well, my family might not know that, but that would be a wonderful gift to give me. Hey, we're getting ready for bed, Mom. I'm going to put your socks on because I know that makes you feel loved, safe, secure, and valued, which is our job as
Mhm.
a caregiver, right?
Yeah. And Jonathan and everyone, even though the overarching context of today's discussion is dementia, um, I think this topic of journaling needs to relate to so much more. It could be uh, any kind of healthcare concern, any kind of life change, our ability to see things that are progressing slowly in our life, it's slow progressing change. Like as an example, like I have a cataract. Uh, that is a very slow progressing healthcare change. And if I had a little journal reflecting on my eyes being tired at night or what have you, when I go into the eye doctor, think about how much more helpful I could be. But I hats off to you, Jonathan. Number one, for identifying yourself as a solo ager, for being open to thinking about this and being willing to share it with us here, because that I feel is a great discussion
And I
question.
think journaling for ourselves, it not only for personal reflection, but for memory preservation, right?
Yeah.
So, that's going to help us in the long run and help those around us with helping us with processing memory, because it's not really about memory loss; it's about processing and help us to better process our memories, right?
Okay. We got some great questions and comments that are coming in that I think are going to really, it's going to be helpful for me. And I'm first going to read Bill's comment regarding journaling, recommendations for better journaling experience. Should the journal be written? Should the journal be videos? I believe since the topic is dementia, video journaling might be a better option. And then James says, how often should we be journaling? If the person did not journal in advance, how do you know the person what the person is doing? Exactly. This is if people aren't doing this, if we're not doing this, or if somebody's not doing it for us, we don't know what happened. But Laura, let's huddle for a bit here on what journals could look like. And I know you, it is self-defined, right? I mean,
Right.
what
Right.
people are comfortable with.
So how do you start this? Well, you can write it out. There's a certain amount of comfort for some of us to hold a pen and write it on paper. But there's wonderful ways to video or do digital kinds of what's comfortable for you. And also, there's some apps out there. There's one called ALZLOG. ALZLOG. There's an app, and that's really good for healthcare providers. It was to kind of define these dementia symptoms for your healthcare provider. It was developed by a nurse. So there's all these different kinds of things, but the first most important thing is to set your own routine. Are you going to be comfortable when you're having your morning coffee? Is that a good time for you to do that? Or what could you do in the evening? Would that be better before you go to bed? I like to do a gratitude journal before I go to bed because it kind of relaxes my mind. So I think of 5 things I'm grateful for, which is another kind of journal, right? 5 things I'm grateful for that happen during the day. And then I go to sleep with that kind of positive energy around me. But you might want to say, 5 challenges I had today, because then your brain can go to work on solving those while you sleep. So there's different things, but you want to make it personal, something that's going to be comfortable for you.
Yeah, and like I love it. V White says sticky notes, placing notes in places where you normally do stuff. Like that could be a form of a journal or something like that. I like, I mean, naturally we think of a notebook and writing. I don't like writing that much. I can't read my handwriting. My fingers start hurting. So if I was to start journaling, I'd probably do it on the computer, and I might use a spreadsheet because I'm comfortable in spreadsheets, or a Word document or something like that. Um, Now, we talk about frequency. James asked, how often should we do this? I think that's another open-ended thing. Like and it could be more goal focused. So I'm thinking that, like, let's say that you're journaling for a loved one or you're a caregiver, and maybe you're just going to observe, you're journaling for unusual behavior. Could
Yeah,
uh
changes, some kind of change. Yes.
Yeah. So that would not be like a daily frequency, but I do like the idea, especially for our for Jonathan, our solo ager, that, maybe something of some kind of frequency to talk about your week or your day.
Mhm.
I can see where, especially as a solo ager, that could be really valuable to your support network. I'm also thrilled to see in our audience we have Wally Clatch. And he even says, how does this usually work? Does a person keep their own journal? Does somebody write down things for them? That could be any or the above. But folks, in chat, I dropped a recording, Living with Dementia, Wally Clatch's Journey of Acceptance, Growth, and Purpose. Wally, who's on our call right now, has been diagnosed with dementia, and I interviewed him last week, and it's fascinating, and it makes you realize how just because we have a dementia diagnosis does not mean we can't live a purposeful life.
Right.
And Laura, let's kind of dive into that a little bit. I know we're talking about journaling and I'm all over the place here, but you work with so many people. Um, and when I interviewed Wally, I think one of the most significant things he talked about was when he got that diagnosis, it was just like this black cloud and almost like paralysis for a period of time, digesting that. And then as he came out, now the goal is to live a purposeful life. T Talk to us a little bit about if we or our loved ones have a diagnosis, some of the ways that we can live a more purposeful life.
Absolutely. I have a very dear friend who is also on my digital support group called the Dementia Lifeboat. His name is Ike Schneider. Ike was always a facilitator for dementia care support groups. He just really has really changed people's lives in Colorado, and just a very dear friend of mine has spread the word with my book and my trainings and all of that. We were just partners in this whole mission, and he recently began to show some pretty significant changes in his cognition and behavior, recognized right away that these were dementia symptoms, and is going through the whole, which is just a story in itself that I can't really share today because it's so long, but going through the whole getting to the medical providers, getting them to somehow diagnose this because it's so difficult for them. And they've decided it's not Alzheimer's, it's something else. But then what do we do with that information? And yet he is still functioning on such a wonderful level, helping those who have dementia symptoms on their journey wherever they are. And so I have learned so much from him. He wrote a whole, if I get dementia symptoms, this is what I want my family to know, with that recognition that he does have dementia symptoms. So it is so powerful. And thank you so much, Wally, for sharing this, because that's how we as dementia aware individuals are going to learn how to better help you, is from the inside out. So
Mhm.
thank you for sharing that. And thanks so much to my dear friend Ike, because I am learning so much every day from him.
And it's giving Ike and Wally purpose to
Yes.
share this, and they're realizing they're not alone. They're connecting with other people who are in the same boat, people that are asking them questions on how to interact with my father or what have you. All right, got some great questions coming through. I want to get to them all. Okay, is using this documentation method important for all individuals who provide care to the individual benefit, like an ongoing dialogue of the day-to-day routines, the person, the mood, the symptoms, is using. I mean, it's very important because without it, without some kind of documentation, it's just anecdotal. You know, it might be accurate, but what I love that you said, Laura, is that this odd behavior may be occurring because they ate a certain meal or went to did had some kind of appointment or had a specific caregiver that is triggering some behavior.
Yep.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's all about how the situation is making them feel, because the feelings are what's left. So it's important that we document that, because it's so abstract. It's not this neon sign that I feel this way, because we have to, and the only way to do that is to document the mood or behavior changes, the cognitive shifts, the physical changes, the changes in their ability to do activities of daily living. It's so broad that we can't just track it by observing it. That's why journaling is so important.
Okay, now Mamela has a great question, and I recognize that I'm all excited about this and how unclear some of this might be because we're talking about there's a lot of different ways to journal. There's an individual journaling, so that would be me. Let's say that I feel like I've got dementia symptoms, and I start writing about my feelings and my experience and what have you. but then there's stepping into a role as a caregiver where you may be journaling about somebody else's behavior that could be useful for yourself and for future medical appointments. And so Mamela says, if the person did not journal in advance, how do you know how the person is doing or if they're giving answers? And so in that case, Mamela and Laura, I'd love for you to comment. I think we're talking about if you kept a journal of what you're observing, but then you could also add to that journal your inquisitive. Again, we don't want to ask questions for somebody, too many questions, but how are you feeling, mom? And writing those observations. What do you think, Laura?
And using positive action statements. Mom, it looks like you're feeling a little bit upset today. And, I get upset too. And often when we open it up like that and join their feelings, then it allows their brain to relax enough that they can connect. Instead of asking how you're feeling, it's say, I see, Mom, that you're really relaxed today. I'm so glad we can have a relaxed day together. So also, it's the history. So now you're in the middle of this dementia care journey and you're saying, oh, I should have been journaling. That's what I ask the families to do. I want you to think back and so then we need the history. I want you to think back, when did you first start seeing some of these changes? And you can backtrack and fill in as a caregiver and what that will do is give you clarity going forward. So it's okay to not have done it. And then it's okay to backtrack once you learn the importance of doing it from now on. Does that make sense?
I I love it. I think it's great. Okay. Now, got a question. What if the individual does not recognize or even see how much they're forgetting, and you bring up the journaling and they ask, why are you saying that? So tell us a little bit about how that might work.
You're not going to share the journal with the person who has the symptoms because they probably are suffering from a syndrome 95% of the time when someone has brain function loss. Their brain does not allow them to know they have that much loss. So it's called anosognosia. They don't know what they don't know. Now, they may know something's not completely right, but if you start giving them too much information about what's going on in their brain, they will become very resistant because it makes them anxious. They can't process that information the same way a healthy brain can. And so often what I hear from family caregivers is they say, oh, dad is so mad at the doctor because the doctor told him he had dementia. And he's saying, no, I don't have dementia. Well, that brain will resist the fact that this horrific thing is happening. It's a very amazing human protection device in our brain, and they cannot recognize they have this kind of loss. So, journaling is for you and the healthcare provider, not for that individual who has dementia symptoms, because it will upset them.
I love it. And but that journal and reflecting on it is going to help you like document like positive action statements that worked and food and things like that. And then that might be shared by the support team in addition to the healthcare professionals. Imagine that you're running a home care agency. I was just thinking about this. I mean, it's why I think this is so brilliant is that let's say that you're running a home care agency and you're sending out caregivers to all of these clients and they're providing care and support and they're observing all this stuff, but they're not necessarily documenting it for the healthcare professionals, for the other caregivers that are coming in, for the family that's going to be there on the weekend. There's just so much good that can happen with coming up with a system to do something like this.
And I
Monique,
learned when I had my in-home care company, I learned how important it was for journaling because often the insurance companies for long-term care, they would not provide financial support unless there was a journal in the home showing the dementia symptoms. So it's also important on a financial side that you have this to show the healthcare provider, to show that insurance company that these changes are happening. So it is important when you have caregivers in the home. But what I would tell those caregivers is keep that journal with you, because if you leave it in the home, how is that individual going to feel? They're going to resist your care if they see that, oh, this caregiver is saying I have this and I have that and this is happening and it's not. So that can cause extreme resistance. So we don't want that in the hands of those that we're actually
But
writing about, which seems a little deceptive, but it's just simply information they can't handle. So,
and one way to look at this, I remember years ago I was at the Consumer Electronics Show at a workshop led by a leader in telemedicine, and this was decades ago. And what he said, at that point in time, we thought telemedicine meant, cameras in the operating rooms and things like that. And he said, no, he goes, I want you to think about a doctor's appointment, going for a physical. When you go into a physical, your doctor is only looking at you at that one point in time for that 5 to 15 minute period where they stick the stethoscope on you, they ask a couple of questions, and then they're out the door. And you could be nervous. You're in a weird environment. And he said the beauty of telemedicine, and we're seeing it now, like with this watch, it tracks everything that I do. It tracks my sleep, it tracks my heart rate, it tracks everything for an entire year. It's essentially a journal of my health status.
right.
And the future of medicine is a doctor will have these details from a long period of time. And imagine if you're concerned about dementia for yourself or your loved one, and you're able to give your doctor in advance some kind of document that sort of tracks different behaviors and symptoms, how much better they can help you. Um, this is awesome. Okay. All right. Ooh, great question here. This is, again, this is something that a journal could be helpful with. Driving their car. What if a doctor says and tells the person to stop driving? Well, this is a great thing that could be documented in a journal, right, Laura?
Right, because often, for example, my mother-in-law started bringing the car home with scuffs on the bumper or, another dent in the door, and she would always say, "I don't know how that happened. Must have happened in the parking lot." And then come to find out after studying this a little bit and really watching and understanding, she was having these small accidents, but to have that in a journal, on Tuesday, she went to the grocery store, came home with another dent in the bumper. Those kinds of things to bring to the doctor so that doctor can make that assessment because mom doesn't know this is happening. She doesn't know this loss is happening because her brain, once again, is in anosognosia and is protecting her, and so it happens, but then there's no place for that to store in her brain. So she comes home and I don't know how that happened, but it could get more and more serious, right? And so that's another really, these noteworthy events need to be documented because they will continue to progress. They will. It won't stop because the loss of brain function will continue to progress in so many different ways.
Yeah, and this is, often the driving, it's the laws are different in every state.
Mhm.
Some states, a dementia diagnosis, they're required to report to the DMV, but what are some of because the door of driving is opened up, what are some of the challenges and solutions that you've seen with the clients that you're working with associated with driving?
Well, more of a loving approach, positive action, but that's when you really, as a caregiver, have to start thinking for them. And so often it means, Mom, I just really, you are such a good driver, but I need to really take over the wheel because I need to learn to be a better driver. And I really enjoy driving now. I'm really getting better at that. And so I'm going to drive today. And then, Mom, the car is just needing a lot of work. So we got to get it to a garage, but I'm going to make sure that someone, while the car's being worked on, that someone's going to be able to take care of your driving needs. So, they don't feel isolated. So, kind of a softer approach because I can guarantee you driving is so emotional and it gives us such feelings of accomplishment and independence. So we can't just snatch that away, but we can talk to those feelings and support those feelings and give them those feelings, but still keep them safe.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've found is that most of us who have lived a car dependent suburban lifestyle, we've never experienced what it's like not to drive. And so one thing, and we're not really even aware that there's alternatives in tons of volunteer ride programs now, Uber and Lyft, GoGo
Yeah.
Grandparents, all of these resources. But what ends up happening is we expect people to make that radical shift from them being independently able to get behind the wheel of their car anytime they want to while they're experiencing healthcare problems. And one of the solutions that you sort of refer to is showing people the alternatives and that it's not that bad. And, from a financial perspective, if you own a car and you're paying insurance on a car and you sold that car and you're not paying insurance anymore, that is a huge fund for Uber, Lyft, giving the next door neighbor a nice buying them lunch because they took you to a doctor's appointment and stuff like
Right.
that.
Yes.
Um, okay, Lindsay says most driving evaluations are unfortunately not covered by insurance and it's an out of the pocket expense, and that's quite high in cost. Just an FYI, because it makes it quite hard for older adults on a fixed income. I totally agree, Lindsay. This is a real wicked problem here that we've got, and one that breaks my heart because the last thing that I want to hear about is somebody driving with dementia and getting in an accident that hurts them or somebody else.
Somebody else.
Jonathan says, follow-up question, how can I journal for myself if I won't be able to recognize the symptoms of my own dementia? Um, let's talk about this, Laura, and maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about the traditional progression of dementia and cognitive diseases. So Jonathan is journaling, and how is he going to notice that anything is going differently?
You know, it's more about just what are you feeling in this moment? Are you feeling a little uncomfortable? Did that not feel like you used to feel kind of thing? So it's okay to kind of deep dive into more abstract things because always what's left is the feelings after the events happen, after the challenges happen, after the behaviors change. So, tonight when I was getting ready for bed, I just felt more confused than I felt last night. It's okay to be that, let's keep it simple and really talk about personal thoughts and feelings because the challenges you're facing, write about how you're feeling, and reflections on your caregiving journey. That really is so important, especially for family and the healthcare providers who are wanting these nuances that are going to help them much more than, I forgot where I put my keys. It's so frustrating the way I feel when my keys aren't in the usual place, and then I have such a difficult time thinking about where they might be. It's more that than the actual, well, today I forgot where I put my keys, so in my mind I did blah, blah, blah. That's the more logical side that you're not going to be able to tap into as well.
Okay, great. Jonathan, hopefully that's helpful. But um, I think it's also, in general, a slow, progressive
Yes.
d- uh, disorder that you should be able to, if you're journaling on any kind of frequency, identify some changes. Um, okay, now this is also kind of stems to what Jonathan is talking about is someone asks, what is the way to test that a doctor used to make a dementia diagnosis? Do they use an instrument or just ask individual questions? Because I see a decline, but the doctor says nothing is wrong when he only asks questions. So, Laura, give us an overview on kind of how you like to have your clients have an official diagnosis of dementia.
And there is no official diagnosis of dementia,
Okay.
only dementia. What happens is when you go to the medical profession and you say, I see these changes in mom, those are actually dementia symptoms. So what the healthcare provider is going to do is take these dementia symptoms. Mom's now having trouble with problem solving. Mom's now having trouble with balance and coordination because she's showing that particular brain function loss. They're going to gather this information and use that to come up with a best guess diagnosis of what's causing these dementia symptoms because there's over 100 causes, but each of these causes, diseases, illnesses, brain function loss of some kind because of a traumatic brain injury, stroke, it starts in certain areas of the brain. For example, Alzheimer's is starting in the section of the brain that helps us with problem solving, processing of memories, processing of what we see and hear. So you're going to see those kinds of dementia symptoms with Alzheimer's disease. But if it's Parkinson's disease, you're going to see a different set of symptoms, tremors, balance and coordination difficulties. So because Parkinson's is going to start that loss in that portion of the brain. So that's how they funnel the diagnosis. Okay, so we see these symptoms, it's probably Alzheimer's disease. We see these symptoms, but it gets confusing because over time they all start to cross. And then the loss is more global. So over time, Parkinson's will also have problems with problem solving, and Alzheimer's will also have some balance and coordination difficulties. So that's why it's important to really, from the far back as we can, to really start to initiate these changes to help the healthcare provider come up with the diagnosis of what's causing the symptoms.
Wow, I love it. And while you were doing that, I'm blown away. We've got two celebrities in the audience. We've got Wally, who I interviewed, but then we've also got Ginger Smith. And Ginger, folks, you'll see in chat there. Ginger Smith is an individual that was diagnosed with dementia. She lived in a nursing home for 2 years and was placed on hospice. And when her medications were removed, she began to recover, and she currently uh, lives independently in a condo in Southern California. But Ginger says, Steve, I was angry and I journaled, which helped me write a book, Dementia Denied, on Amazon. And I put the link to the interview with Ginger there. Both Ginger and Wally just totally inspirational. And the fact that they're tuning into this discussion, I'm really honored, but it really goes to show how just talking about this and thinking about it is we identify resources for each other.
Isn't it amazing? I've been doing this for 25 years and I still learn something new every day, Steve. So
Oh,
thank
yeah.
you. Thank you for this
No,
opportunity.
no, this is great. Wow. And I can't believe it. We are have burned through an hour already. I want to make sure to save a little bit of time, Laura, to just make sure folks know how and what they can reach out to you about. So I'm going to pull up your website here real quick. Um, and folks, you can connect with Laura at laurawayman.com. She is the author of The Loving Approach to Dementia Care, which is in its third edition, and you can get that at laurawayman.com. But Laura, um, you're I mean, you're obviously a well-regarded speaker. I've seen you on on the conference circuit, so folks can hire you if they're organizing a conference. But you also do training for organizations and individuals, or for organizations. But do you work also with individuals one-on-ones? So, like, if there's a family or an individual that needs coaching, do you work with them one on one as well?
I do. I do Zoom consultations for families, and you can load on as many family members as you would like. It's 90 minutes on Zoom, so I do them all over the country. And we just really become dementia aware, and I customize your care approach to the individual. Now, you don't want the individual with dementia symptoms on that call. So sometimes we have to do two different calls because that individual might need care. But we figure that out. And I am in front of professional caregivers, first responders. I do workplace presentations. And like I said, I love doing these family consultations. All you have to do is just get a hold of me and we schedule those. I do evenings and weekends because often, everybody's working and often just a 90-minute, but sometimes those families want a few more of those. We have a lot to learn. I'm working with a family and we're on our third Zoom consultation because of just the timing of some different events and some decisions that they were having to make. So I like to tell the families the cavalry's arrived. We're going to figure this out together, and you're going to see this in a very different perspective that will empower you and inspire you. Same thing with professional staff. I'm in front of hundreds of professional staff and empower them to be motivated and inspired to really become a better caregiver. And I do workplace keynote conferences or assisted living, dementia care, first responders, all of those. I believe everyone should be dementia aware. So I have really tried to develop this program so that everybody can relate to this need.
And reflecting on being dementia aware, I love that term. Folks, like, I mean, I feel like I might be dementia aware at this point, but it's because I've done hundreds of these discussions. It's very difficult. It takes a long time to get our loved ones and family members, especially, and this, we see this often, right, Laura, where you've got siblings and there's one primary caregiver who's very aware of the situation and trying to get brothers and sisters on board. It can feel like pulling teeth sometimes. I love the dementia aware concept.
And then
Uh,
I mentioned earlier, I have my online, the Dementia Lifeboat. It's on the school platform, SKOOL. So you can go on, ask for the Dementia Lifeboat, and it will come up. But we have poolside chats. We had one last night, the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month, where we have different professionals, family caregivers, but it's kind of a mix between a podcast and a support group. And I have many different perspectives, professionals, like I said, and family caregivers. And last night we were talking about how movement matters. And I had a wonderful organization called Corrective Exercise that works specifically with those with dementia symptoms, and they've been trained dementia aware. And so talking about that, but just all different kinds of opportunities for questions like this today.
That's great. Shaw says, how much does the family consultation cost? And do you do an initial free consultation so that you can talk to folks and understand all that?
What I like to do is tell you, let's do 30 minutes of initial consultation and see if I can even help you. And then we can set up the 90-minute, which is $150. So I just have just a brief phone call and then we set up the Zoom. And
Okay.
almost always, I have to say, okay, 30 minutes are up and I want to give you more. And so immediately they understand the need for the Zoom consultation.
Okay, great. And then the Dementia Lifeboat program, is there a cost associated with that?
Yes, it is $15 a month to become a member, but then everything's recorded. So if you miss the poolside chats or the trainings that are in the library, you can always go back and enjoy those because everything's recorded. So, I've really started to grow that community and I'm real excited about the whole reflection, and it's really working lovely. I would love to have anybody join, see what you think, and you can always teach me to be better as
I
well.
love it. This is great. All right, folks. I'm charged up about this. There is so much more that we can do out here in terms of journaling. I see it as a tremendous solution and a blind spot, not only for us as consumers, but for healthcare professionals. I mean, wouldn't it make sense for you meet with your doctor, you're asking about, you know, uh what you think are symptoms, and instead of just sending you, oh, you're fine, Steve, it's sort of like, hey, try this, journal your thoughts and feelings for the next 6 months and then come back to me. That to me makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Man,
Absolutely.
this is great, Laura. Thanks to everybody who joined in today. And the and as a reminder, all this chat, all the recording, podcast version, it'll be up at proaging.com later today, and Laura's links so you can get in touch with her as well. But definitely going to have you back on again, Laura. This has been great, and
Anytime, Steve.
thank everybody for your participation. The questions really make these conversations so dynamic.
Hmm.
All right.